Influencers, inspiration, and Instagram. This is Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Here's Conor Begley.
Welcome to Earned, everybody. Today is a very special day, perhaps the most important day both professionally for me as well as for Tribe. So Tribe has decided to join forces with CreatorIQ and become the definitive platform leader in the space, both from a revenue perspective, headcount perspective, growth perspective, global presence perspective. And as part of that, I've brought Igor here to join us on the show so that everybody can get to know him. Igor is the CEO of CreatorIQ and has an extensive background in technology as an entrepreneur, over 30 years in the space, or in the technology space. So welcome to the show, Igor. Thanks for joining.
Conor, thank you. Excited to be here and feel a little jealous of your shirt.
And actually, as part of that, so for those who don't know, obviously we wear a Hawaiian shirt each time. I got these printed today. They're very special. They're vintage, or not vintage, they are one of a kind. I guess not one of a kind. I've got another one here.
So future vintage.
Yes, future vintage. So I've got CreatorIQ and Tribe logos, and as part of that, I've gotten one for you, which is fun.
I would have worn one today.
It's okay.
Okay.
We'll have to do it for the press photo.
Twins.
But for those that don't know CreatorIQ,
you
guys are you guys are the largest platform in the space today. You work with big brands like Sephora, AB InBev, Unilever, et cetera. And I think that our products are particularly complementary, right? And that's part of the reason that we thought this combination would be great. But I'd love to hear in your words, what about this combination got you excited? Like, what was it that made you want to do this thing?
Well, I've known you for a long time. I've known of Tribe since before I started CreatorIQ.
Yeah.
And you guys clearly did something right. You early on captured lightning in a bottle with becoming a standard.
Yeah,
you built
absolutely.
a team that stuck with you for a long, long time and trying to build something exciting. You're winning for sure.
Yep.
And we're just so complementary. Our products, our spaces, our clients, our teams. Couldn't just think of I was talking to a friend and he asked, what are you worried about? I'm worried about I can't really find anything wrong yet with this deal.
I swear, I feel like that's been the prevailing sentiment for everybody that's been involved. Is like, you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, wait, well, what if this is going to be wrong? Like, oh, no, not really. And to your point on the complementary part, I remember we actually met up a few years ago in a bar, and I I talked about combining the businesses. And I think at that time, we had a lot of similarities, but then since then, it seems like we've really gone on different paths and different specialties that now just work really well together.
You know what, I remember that. I don't know if I remember you pitching or talking about combining businesses. I think we talked through what you were working on and the transformation you were going through in the business.
Yes.
And what I was doing. And I think where we left it was, let's talk again soon once we work through what we're each doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe I'm remembering what I wanted to have done. Well, let's get into, I want people to get to know you, right? So that's really what today is about, to get to know you, to get to know CreatorIQ, because obviously we've gotten to build quite a community on our side, and I think they're going to want to feel really good about our combined businesses together. So tell me a little bit about your background. I'd love to know specifically your path to CreatorIQ, what led you to doing that, what led you to decide to want to be an entrepreneur, right? Because historically you'd been at other big technology companies. So what led you to wanting to be an entrepreneur, and what led you to wanting to start CreatorIQ?
So I didn't actually set out to be an entrepreneur,
but
okay. I was always comfortable in smaller, quick moving teams. Before I had kids, I was at a couple companies that were small, grew quickly. We didn't call them startups back then, and we had to be profitable. But I had twin daughters and then a son, and then at some point you want to be home for dinner.
Yeah.
And just bigger companies seemed like a place to be where you have
a little more settled,
more
and
structure.
Consistent.
Yeah. So it was good for me through personally in my personal life, and it was good for me professionally because I got to see what hyper growth big companies look like and what good looks like from that side of the wall. But by the time my kids were in high school, I had a little bit more time on my hands. I was itching to go do. I didn't want to start a company, but I was itching to go just something a little bit more agile and entrepreneurial. And
Yeah, well, you certainly, I mean, the last, call it what, 7 years for you guys have been a little crazy.
oh gosh, time flies so fast. Yeah.
Oh my God, I look at it, I'm like, how am I this many years into Tribe? Like, I look at other people's resumes, it's like, oh, you've been here for 3 years or 2 years. I'm like, what do you do in 2 years? You can't do anything. Like, I feel like I haven't done that much in 9 years. Well, I know that you spent some time at Experian, as a CTO there, and it seems like that was, well, CTO, CIO, a bunch of different roles. It seems like that was pretty formative for you, both in terms of, I've had a lot of meetings with former coworkers that you had there. Talk to me about that time. What was it like? What did you guys focus on at Experian?
So I was at Experian's consumer division. So
Yep.
it was very quickly hyper growth group, quite large revenue-wise, as big as the bureaus. And as time fades, as you leave, you forget the projects, you forget the details, you remember people.
Yeah.
It's not just Experian, it's kind of going back to other formative experiences I have. You remember people and you keep up with the people. You remember kind of the vibe and the feeling, right? Getting up in the morning without an alarm clock because you all had something to do and you were kind of like-minded in building it.
Yeah.
And Experian, and it wasn't the only place with that vibe, but that was one of the experiences where you just know you're going to keep up with those people, whatever you do later. And you'll you'll want to work with them, but even if you're not, you still see them. And that's probably true for every other place I've been that had that type of culture and vibe. And others, I don't remember really well, right? Just remember, I remember I was there, and I'm sure it was perfectly fine people, and I got a paycheck. But that's probably the biggest differentiator for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that like people really underestimate kind of that network and how it builds over time, and really thinking in decades rather than years, right? Like, how can the relationships I'm building today lead to, somebody I'm going to work with in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Because it just starts to multiply really quickly over time. Like, we've had the fortunate experience of having a lot of our original team stick around, but even those that have decided to go off and do new things have, we continue to work with them, or they refer us clients or whatever, right? Or maybe we work with them in the future. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and sometimes you just hang out together.
Yeah. It's weird. It doesn't always have to be about business, right? I remember hearing, and there's this thing on Twitter I saw that was saying like in Europe, it's okay to do non-GDP increasing activities, but in the US it's not, right? Like, everything you do has to contribute economically, basically.
Yeah, our president, Murray Blacks, he called a social hour on his calendar.
Yeah.
Several times a week, where he just catches up with people he works with without any business in mind.
I like that.
And I love the discipline, because we're so busy and we are thinking about GDP activities, just consciously talking to people just because you miss them and you want to see what they're doing without anything else in mind.
At the same time, I love that he has to schedule it, right? He's got to block it out.
You have to know that. That's good. He's a very structured person.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the early days of CreatorIQ. Obviously, you guys have gone through a lot of hyper growth over the last, call it 5-6 years. What have been some of the biggest challenges for you guys during that period? What are some of the things that you ran into that you feel like you've learned from?
Well, this is my first time CEO, so first time I had to do it by myself. I've been on boards, I've been an investor, I've been at C-level in companies, but it's nothing like doing it yourself. And when you're in a quickly changing space, when you're growing, every year it's a different company. Every year, it's not like you can take what you've learned in the previous 12 or 18 months and apply it, because how you get to the next stage is not how you got there. So there's like this, you're not bored, there's like constant ongoing learning and constant ongoing really thinking of, this is day one. What do we do next?
Oh, I know. I mean, things just, we've obviously been on a similar trajectory, and it's like things just break, right? As soon as you get a process and a system in place, then you go from, okay, now we're at 10 people to we're at 25. Well, it's like, oh, now all of our communication systems, we used to all sit around a table, that no longer works, right? And then it's like, okay, now we can't all sit around like 2 lunch tables, right? Like, how do you even, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're in you're a startup, you have 6, 7 people, you're around the table. When you come to the office, every meeting is all hands meeting.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't have to think about it all hands meeting. You don't have to think about status meeting.
I tell you what, I kind of miss those days. Like those were, because you're just going, right? Like everybody's got their lane, everybody's got their path, and like it is a little bit easier in some ways.
Well, and if I have to synthesize what's on my mind constantly as we go through the stage, is how to not lose that. There's nothing more fun, more effective, more almost dangerous than a small team of like-minded people that just out there to win. And doesn't have the communication overhead, doesn't need to worry about the structures, the emails, and how to, as you get bigger, you get more resources, you get stronger, you can specialize, but it's that part that at the end of the day makes people win, and how not to lose that. So this is what's constantly on my mind as we go through our growth stages.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a big challenge for us. I mean, we're obviously both businesses that are growing very quickly. Together, we hope to grow even faster. And so things will break even more quickly and get even bigger. So I know Elon Musk recently talked about like kind of shortening communication between people, right? So instead of having like, okay, I've got one individual contributor that goes to manager, 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 and then goes down, 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 right? How do you connect those and shorten those circuits? So yeah, we'll have to figure out how we do that.
So in the olden days, we had a phone with a cord and a button, and you just say, hey, pick up the phone and have a 2-minute conversation. Now between Slacks and cell phones and Zoom, I still haven't figured out, people just don't expect you to pick up the phone and say, hey. So I have too much information coming at me, and sometimes too much information is being sent out, and that's what's on my mind. How to kind of compress it to just pick up the phone and have a quick conversation.
You know what's funny is I feel like I've been transitioning back to that. So Steve, who's on our board, is kind of similar, right? In terms of this is how he used to do business. So he's calling us all the time. So now I'm just going to call John all the time, right? And it's actually like once you get into that rhythm, you're like, oh wow, this is actually a really effective way to communicate. There's probably a reason people have done this for thousands of years. So let's talk about the people, right? So I think for you, one of the things that I really appreciated from afar before I got to know CreatorIQ really well was your team. Right? And it looked like the team that you had recruited was incredibly competent, that had incredible backgrounds and pedigrees. And it feels like as the company grows and as your individual contribution to that company changes, the role of the CEO becomes more and more about finding fantastic people and getting them excited to join the company. I think you've already roped me into a couple of those conversations. So tell me, what's been your philosophy, and how do you think you've gotten to identify these really great people and then get them to join on to the mission? Like, what's that process been like for you?
I haven't really thought of it that way. I haven't thought about identifying people and having a process. I like people. I like talking to people. I like people who want to get shit done. I like people who have a mission, who want to build things. I like people who just feel confident in what they're doing and want to accomplish good things. And then it just becomes a conversation. Hey, what do you do? What are you interested in? How do you think about problems? And these things just happen. In some of those conversations, people become part of my network. Some of those conversations we don't talk again. And sometimes you have a second and third conversation, and you don't even need to make an offer. You just know that you're going to work together. But it's really like-minded people. Like-minded in the sense that we want to build things, we want to serve customers, we want to help people who work for us build their careers and have the same experiences we had when we were younger.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if I even think about recruiting. I might make my intention clear that, hey, I want to work with you. But it's always, what do you want? What are you looking for? What's your style? How do we work together? And then it just happens or doesn't happen.
It's funny because it actually reminds me a lot of my own personal, right? So when we first started Tribe, so prior to Tribe, I was in sales, right? And I did very well in sales. And then, we started Tribe, and as an entrepreneur, right, a lot of what you're doing is selling, right? And I actually think that word gets a really bad name. Because when I would talk to people, I wasn't trying to sell them anything, right? What I tried to do was be like an expert on the topic learn from what they're, how they're approaching the problem, what issues they're dealing with, which both helped us to make a better product, as well as helped us to be more informed on the topic. And then hopefully, as part of that, if we have something that's going to help them, great, right? I was never selling anything. I was just trying to help them get better, and we also had a tool that kind of aligned with that thing, right? And it sounds, it's really similar to the way that you talk about recruiting. It's not about recruiting. It's about meeting really interesting people that are really driven, and when there's something that aligns and there's an opportunity to work together, like that's great, right?
Yeah, being open to it. And the other thing I do is I try to warn people why they might not want to work with me, or why they might not want to work in this company, because you figure so they'll find out in 6 months, in 3 months, in 2 months anyway.
And it's no good when that happens.
Yeah, because being in an entrepreneurial culture, startup is even the wrong word. We've been at this for too long to call it a startup, but it is a mindset. It's entrepreneurial culture. We're growing quickly. We want to take advantage of opportunities. We don't want to build bureaucracy. We're not trying to survive. I think neither one of us would be doing this if we hit a wall. But it has its downsides. Its downsides, people who are more comfortable with structure, who are more comfortable with longer term planning, who are more comfortable with stability. They're not always comfortable in an environment like that. And then there's also personalities, like say, hey, I might tend to repeat myself here and there. Sorry.
Same. My wife rips on me constantly for that one.
Just making sure that somebody, I don't want to say can't stand you, because we can stand each other, but
just doesn't work well together.
It could work well together. So having maybe 2 or 3 conversations too many as we're going through the process and getting to know each other, I find just so helpful for me.
Totally. And I mean, that's definitely something that you've emphasized, I think, throughout this, is just making sure that our teams can work together, right? And I think, where I've seen that go awry for me in the past was actually more about, like, we would find somebody that was really great, right? And like, oh my God, I want this person to work for us. And then the opportunity that we had and who that person was, like, weren't a perfect fit, right? But I was like, let's just bring them in anyways, right? And you kind of overpromise, or you kind of say, hey, we can figure it out, and it just doesn't end up working out. So let's talk about, this idea of kind of working together, people, et cetera, as we start thinking about putting these 2 things together, these 2 businesses together. So you've really emphasized culture and people and spending time together as like critical elements. What is it from your past that has led you to think that, like, hey, this is a really critical element, potentially one that's overlooked?
I don't think it's overlooked. I think people know that it's important. I don't know if culture is such a generic wide term, and it means so many different things to different people. What I've seen is one group of people excels. The other group of people with the same opportunity just doesn't. And the difference that I found was just that vibes that fit between them. And they want to work together. It doesn't mean that they're best friends out of work, but they want to build the same things together. They're excited. They wake up. They're focused on how to solve a problem. They put some fear aside. They have the same idea of, like, kind of risk tolerance and really empathy towards each other. Empathy and trust, right? Because everybody's job is difficult, and give each other a little bit of leeway when somebody makes a mistake. So they don't have to spend their mental energy watching their back. They don't have to worry about somebody not having their back if something goes wrong. They're just worried about solving a problem together. And I just found those cultures exciting, invigorating, and this is what when I talk about 20 years later, the companies I remember that vibe, and I remember the people who were part of it, and that's the people I keep up with.
That trust element is, like, really underrated. I've kind of figured that out over time. I feel like John and I, we work together now for almost 9 years. We've known each other for 15, and like, especially at the top, it's like that trust there, that, like, we both are looking out for each other is, like, super important. Like, we've made big changes in terms of corporate structure over time, and I think it would have been really hard if we didn't have that. So,
and then not everybody who gets along can work together either. I mean, I have good friends that I would never want to work with. They would drive me nuts. I would drive them nuts too. So it's also kind of recognition that it's okay if every culture, every environment is not for everybody, right? It's finding what's right for you. And
I'm thinking of some people like, no. I've had some friends that are like, hey, pitch me on an idea. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. You should definitely do that. Like that's like a good idea.
I almost had a co-founder for this company.
Yeah.
And I love him, get along together, spend a lot of time together. And as we're trying to form this together, he said, this just doesn't feel right. I don't think
we're kind of forcing this.
Yeah. It's like, you know what? You're absolutely right.
It's better to have those conversations early, for sure. I think it's one of the most common reasons that companies fall apart, right? Is just founders' disagreements or co-founder disagreements. So let's talk a little bit about realizing that we haven't really told people a lot about CreatorIQ. So in your words, when you have to describe CreatorIQ to somebody else, you know, how would you describe it? Like, what makes you guys special? Where have you really found your traction? Tell me about that.
Well, I love the space. I love the space. I love the changes that it's bringing. And I'm a technologist. I'm an operator, so didn't want to have an agency. Didn't want to sell media. Wanted to build software. Software that facilitates the work, that has measurement and data to help people make better decisions. And given that it's a new industry, and even so it's been around for a while, it is still new. It is changing so quickly.
Super new.
The part that I feel strongest about is just being a solution provider to people who are trying to figure this out, being an enabler, and learning as we go along on what's working and not working for our users. Back to what you said, definitely being disappointed when things break, being disappointed where we take a wrong turn, but being able to adjust quickly, because if you're a solution provider, you're focused on what problems do my clients have? What are they trying to figure out to stay in business, to grow both professionally and growing their businesses?
The thing I still get the most satisfaction out of is just looking at the numbers and being like, holy shit, like there are thousands of people logging in every day, and they're logging in not because I'm telling them to or paying them to or because they have some obligation to. It's because they're like doing it because it makes their lives easier. And like that is like, it's just the weirdest thing in the world to me, like, and the most satisfying thing in the world. And I think that, one of the conversations I really remember that we had early on was you talking about the early days of CreatorIQ and like how much time you spent with those end users.
You have to. I was new to the industry. I was an investor. I met many multi-channel networks. And was lucky that they would kind of let me into their doors and let me figure out what they're doing. And I just sat at the floors and with the desks and looked over people's shoulders and looked at the spreadsheets and looked at the papers they were writing. I was trying to figure out how they're spending time and what are kind of little annoying things that you want to remove, and what are like the big problems that enables a company to grow and scale.
I'll never forget, I was at a client's office, it was Aloe Yoga, and I like walked in, we have our meeting, and as I'm walking out, they had like their desks set up, right? And there's people sitting at their desks, and I walk by and there's a girl with, our application open, and she's just clicking around and I just sat there and I watched her for a second, and I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is so cool. And awkwardly, I was like, can I take a photo? This is just like one of my, seeing it in the wild was so awesome. And I think in a lot of ways, that direct connection is your strategic advantage when you're small, right? As you can say, I know John used to talk about it all the time. We put in a little inbox. It was that would say it started with, hey, Conor and John, and then you could write in a message, right? And it would be like, what's broken, how can I fix it? And so they would send those messages, we would get it, and then John was obviously building the application, and they'd be like, oh, this is broken, this isn't working, and he'd reply 10 minutes later hey, I just pushed a fix, it's working now.
So
and they're
cool.
wait, the co-founder just emailed me, he just fixed it in 10 minutes, what just happened? And I think that's, it's just it's a really cool superpower at the beginning.
You know what, I want to borrow that. Is there a reason not to go back to something like that?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad system. I think
it's not. I'm so uncomfortable with the queues and prioritization, and we have a good process.
So many
scale.
Layers, right?
Yeah, and it's works, but let's figure out what we call that inbox.
I dig it. I'm into it. So let's talk about kind of this combination, and let's talk about the industry a little bit. So, obviously, I think what I find really special is you guys are so good at the campaign management, the workflow enablement, all of those components, particularly when it comes to paid, relationships. And we're more focused on the organic relationships, community management, analytics, right? Which is why I think we pair so well together. Where do you see this space going, like over the next, call it 5 years or so? Like, what do you think is going to evolve? What do you think is going to change? Tell me about that.
Well, we're seeing the same thing in the market. Creator is becoming more and more important and at the center. As a content partner, not just as an amplifier of the message, not just a shell trying to resell things, but a true content partner who has trust and who knows their audience, who knows how to talk to them. And becoming even more important as a storefront, somebody who can drive sales, and that's changing the budget. That's we know that the eyeballs have been moving for a long time to different devices. We know who people trust. It's been changing at just breathtaking speed. Even my 26-year-old kids are telling me, oh my gosh, our 15-year-old cousins are like different species the way they. And I said, there's a 55-year-old in amazement. But all of it is accelerating the change and having the software, having the measurement to enable it, providing more tools to our clients and probably more and more tools to creators is probably at the center of what we want to do, where we want to play, to be to be the software rails, to be the measurement rails, to be a trusted transaction partner for our client, both for our clients and for creators.
Yeah, I feel like the kind of broader trend that people miss out on sometimes in terms of this like rapid pace of change and development is that, if you look over the last 150 years, there's only been a certain number of changes that have had dramatic effects on the way that information is distributed and the way that information is consumed, right? So you had, you went the printing press, right? If you want to go back that far, right? No, but seriously, right? You think about what are the biggest changes that have occurred over the last 150 years in terms of communication? You had the printing press, then you had like radio, which would then, now I don't have to have any physical distribution of the object. Then you had television, which added a visual element to that communication. And then more recently, you've had internet and mobile phones, which has allowed anybody to create and distribute information costlessly, and then as a consumer to have access to infinite information. And so it's just opened up different sources of information that help people to make decisions, whether that's political decisions, buying decisions, or whatever it happens to be. And so I think being at the center of that is just fascinating, right? And at the same time, what it's also unlocked is this entire this group of small businesses where people are now allowed to become their own publishers, which I think is another space that we're talking collaboratively about getting into, that I just get really excited about.
Yeah, well, there's talented people who have hobbies, and sometimes the hobbies becomes a livelihood, sometimes it's just a hobby, and they have audiences, and this is just another way for them to cut out the middleman.
Yeah, absolutely.
To cut out the middleman and supplement their income and have an opinion, and products they use attach their ethos to the ethos of the brands that they think represent them, and through that can provide trusted opinions to clients, as opposed to just TV and jingles and paid advertising. But that shift is fascinating. I think it's good. It's fun.
I mean, it's funny you talk about removing the middleman, and it certainly does that, but it also removes the gatekeeper, right?
But that's
because it's like before you had somebody at NBC that decided who got to go on and have their opinions and not, right? And now that doesn't exist, right? There's no gatekeeper. Like you can go on and say whatever you want about anything you want.
For good and for bad.
For good and for bad. But I think in general, at least across history up until this point, each time there's been one of these new things. It's like, radio when it first came out, there was all kinds of crazy stuff that was happening on the radio, all, misinformation, propaganda, whatever. But inevitably it becomes more regulated, it becomes more structured and better, right? And that's kind of we're in that Wild West phase right now where, still need to get to that point, but it will get there, right? And I think in the long run, the good certainly outweighs the bad. But I also we both started businesses in this space, so I think we're a little biased.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We are. I don't know if biased is the right word, but we are optimistic.
So the final thing I want to get to about CreatorIQ that I find really unique, and I find really special, is during this process, when we first started having these conversations, you and your team flew to Ukraine to meet with your technology team out there. And I think that the culture and the team that you've built out there, both in terms of being some of the earliest members to join, and then some of the most loyal people over time, is just fascinating for me, right? And obviously I flew out and met them.
I know. So that was great, talking about the culture and knowing that there is a fit.
Yeah.
When we were still trying to decide, you had many options. You didn't have to join us. You could have raised money at great valuation, your business would do just fine.
Yep.
And we weren't sure where it's going, and I think we talked Saturday morning when we were trying to decide how to proceed, and I asked if you wanna grab dinner with me Monday night.
Well, he kind of hinted in an email. He hinted, he's like, hey, it's too bad you couldn't come. I'm like, John, did Igor just invite me to Ukraine? And then I sent it back. I was like, did you invite me? And you're like, you should come. Here's the plane flight. Da, da, da. And then I told my wife, I was like, I think I'm going to Ukraine tomorrow. She's like, what?
That was cool. We had dinner like 10 p.m. We met a big part of the team. Yeah. You probably didn't sleep for 36 hours, which was fine.
I slept on the plane on the way there. That was my first really long international business flight that was full lay flats. It was great. It was nice. But tell me about the role that team has played for you guys. And I think a lot of what I was talking to Bethany about and some of the other team is, making those two cultures more and more collaborative over time. But tell me about that team specifically and kind of the role that they've played.
Well, they're part of our team. They just happen to be on the other side of the globe and have different accents, but so do I. And, but
I've heard you call it your Cleveland accent.
I did go to junior high and high school and undergrad and grad in Cleveland, so
yes.
Accent aside, feels like I grew up there. But back to the Ukraine team. They're part of CreatorIQ. Half of the people there, some of the oldest employees are there. They have CreatorIQ football team and poker team and basketball team and yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you got to see them.
Oh my God! I think I got very lucky.
What did you think?
I thought they were awesome. I had such a great time with them, and I think what was surprising to me is I feel like, in the U.S., that part of Eastern Europe gets branded in a certain way, right? And I got out there, and it was just not what I expected. It was awesome, great dinner, great people, so nice. Like, it was really special.
Yeah, a small, vibrant European country.
Yeah.
Music on the streets, big parks, very large college town, very educated, smart.
The parks were beautiful, too. They were really well maintained. All right, so I want to make sure that people get to know you really well personally, and we always like to finish the show with like a end of show fun question. And so as part of that, I know last night at dinner, we were talking a lot about family and the value of long-term relationships, and you've been with your wife, May, for over 30 years. So I'd love to know if there is, one family quirk that you guys have that, people wouldn't expect. And maybe there's not. Maybe you guys are, leave it to Beaver and there's nothing surprising about you.
Tell me what you mean by quirk.
What's one fun thing that you guys do that has been really special to your family over the years?
I might throw it back at you because I really, I can't
Yeah. So what's one of our fun so for our family, my wife and I, this has been a recent obsession, but we've recently gotten obsessed with Survivor. And to the point that now I think my wife and I are considering going on Survivor at some point. If it wasn't, if it wasn't, the big thing is I don't care about the camera, despite the fact I'm doing a podcast on camera. I don't care about the camera. I don't care about getting to be well known. Frankly, I would prefer not. I just want the competition. I think the specificity of the tactics used in that, I think, are just fascinating. And like now that we're like 10 plus seasons in, like you just really know it deeply. And so I'd say that's one quirk that we have going as a family. And I think we're going to try and get our kids into it too. Well, with that, I really want to thank you again, Igor. I think today is a very special day. I'm really excited at what we're going to build together over the next few years. And I think it's going to be a really, really big deal when it gets announced.
It is a big deal.
Thanks again for joining.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Hit subscribe now. Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Tribe Dynamics unlocks your social media influencer community. Our platform not only tracks and measures your best influencer relationships, but discovers new influencers to grow your business through earned media. Get started with a demo today at tribedynamics.com. tribedynamics.com.